AI agents are everywhere, automating tasks and making decisions at machine speed. But agents make mistakes. Just one rogue agent can do big damage before you even notice. Rubrik Agent Cloud is the only platform that helps you monitor agents, set guardrails, and rewind mistakes, so you can unleash agents, not risk. Accelerate your AI transformation at Rubrik.com. That's RUBRIK.com.
Welcome to the Overcomers Overcoming podcast series, where we profile those who are overcoming and those who have overcome various life topics. I am Ron Cooper, along with my wife and business partner, Marty, of the Cooper Culture, who is sponsoring this series. Many people who have overcome life events have inspired me to produce this series. We want you to know you are not alone in whatever you're experiencing. Life has taught me that everyone has a story that someone needs to hear. Join us as we profile those who choose to be a lifestyle chainbreaker. Let's engage their story to inspire us and others within our circle of influence. Hi, welcome aboard to our podcast series, Overcomers Overcoming. We have a very special guest with us, Mike. Mike, great to have you with us, and thank you for being willing to share your story.
Not a problem. Thanks for having me.
Mike, can you just walk us through a little bit of your background and what got you to the point that you are?
Yeah, so, just to touch a little bit on, like, my childhood, right? A lot of times we talk about, like, that feeling of inadequacy, not fitting in, not being good enough. Whether that be a physical thing. For me, I grew up the smallest kid in the class. I didn't have all the things in life that a lot of the other kids have. My parents were, separated, divorced at a young age for me. So all that kind of just, like I said, affected me internally, right? Because on the external, like, everything looked good. Those feelings of not fitting in, when you looked around, like, you would have thought, like, how can this kid feel that way, right? Because he has a bunch of friends. He excels at sports. He does this, he does that. We talk a lot about feeling alone in a room full of people, and, like, that's literally how it was for me as a child. Like I said, I did fit in. I was good enough. I had a decent life, right? The best life that could be provided for me by my mother at the time for what she had, right? But I'm a firm believer that, like, I was born an addict, and, a lot of addict mentality and tendencies is, that negative sense of self. And all those outside things, I think, really, affected me at a young age, and they stuck with me and kind of started at some point to control my thought process, which eventually down the road started to control my actions. To kind of get into the whole addiction thing, I experimented for the first time with alcohol, right? I was at a New Year's Eve party with my sister and her older friends. I was about 10 years old, right? So I was with all the kids who were like 16, 17. And what I really remember from that night is, actually feeling like I was part of. For whatever reason, right? I just remember the older kids laughing. Looking back, they were probably laughing at me, not necessarily with me, but, like, I just remember in that moment just feeling part of, right? By having this substance within my body that, did what I searched for my whole life, right? It took me out of myself. It made all those voices in my head that told me all those negative things kind of quiet down just for that moment.
I'm very curious about your statement, Mike, when you said that, correct me if I'm not using the correct term, you were almost destined to do drugs.
So, the whole disease model of addiction, who's to say, really, right? You could research scientific facts all day, but what I do know scientifically, right, is that addiction is hereditary, that addiction and alcoholism runs throughout my family on both sides. The way I kind of describe that is that, like, in recovery, we try to identify addict tendencies, behaviors, stuff like that, to try to keep those things in check. But when I look back at my childhood, all those things were apparent in my life before I ever put any kind of substance into my body. Like I said, just searching for something that would take me out of myself, that instant gratification of like, I want what I want and I want it now. That isolation, that feeling of isolation, even when I'm surrounded by people. For me, it gets kind of hard because to me, the disease of addiction is not just about drugs. That's where my disease took me. And that's one of the things that I continue to battle on the forefront every day. But for me, it just is a lot deeper than that.
Okay, so what I'm hearing from you is that I don't know that medically there is a genetic predisposition to drugs, but those before you were doing drugs, and so if a genetic predisposition is possible, then that could have been a reason where you were somewhat predisposed to drugs. But yeah, it was interesting you said that you were not a case of not feeling accepted. You did, but you still had some feelings of inadequacy. And
so I don't know, maybe I worded that wrong, but it wasn't that I didn't feel it. I felt that way, but it just wasn't the truth. Like I was saying, those what I call those voices in my heads, that low self-image, this low self-worth, like all those things were just point blank lies that my head was telling me. Like I did fit in, but I didn't feel like I felt in.
Yep.
It's a crazy thing when there's valid evidence of a truthful statement, and you still don't want to believe it.
Certainly. No, thank you for sharing that, Mike. And yes, those kind of things. There is there's factual evidence that those things, that it's a belief system that I've been raised to believe, or I just believed because of my environment, that I just didn't fit in well, that people didn't accept me. And sometimes we can't clearly identify a person, a statement. It was just kind of the surrounding environment. But progresses, Mike, in time where you got involved in drugs, and at what point did you say that I call it a breaking point? What is it that said I cannot continue this way any longer?
Yeah, so the progression of the drug use, look, I grew up in the DARE era, just say no, and for years of my life, like I swore to myself, to my loved ones, that's exactly what I would do. My father, wasn't there in my life because of his drug use. I saw that there was evidence in my life that that wasn't the right road to take, that I wouldn't amount to anything, or at least not acquire and achieve the goals and aspirations that I had for myself at a young age. And part of it is the common story, right? Everybody else is doing it. I was kind of what I consider late bloomer to the drug use process. I did my little weekend warrior partying, regular, if there is a regular, high school thing throughout high school. I moved away to college, and I was, just kind of put into an environment where, there were some other things going on. Looking back, I can't identify, was it to fit in? What the reason was why, I decided to, go against that, just say no and say yes and try other things other than, I don't know. It just, it was just a decision that I made, and that definitely progressed, the substances progressed, the, amount of times and the frequency of use progressed, so it was really like all through my 20s, right? Like I said, it was one substance to the other. It was, more frequent, and what I found was that, like, I was starting to try to, like, assemble my life. I started to change my life and all the aspects of it to, make me be able to do what I wanted to do more often. I didn't pursue a career-oriented job. I was like, oh, well, I can work for myself. I won't have a boss to answer to. So I started trying to align my life to like continue to live what I thought was the life that I wanted to live, until that life that I thought I wanted to live was no longer manageable in my life. I was around 27 years old. I had gotten in some legal trouble, and at that point, I didn't know anything about recovery. I didn't know anything about the 12-step fellowships. What I knew was that I wasn't built for any kind of, jail setting. So at that time, I kind of just sought some advice from, a legal advice aspect, and I was suggested a couple things, that I should probably try to, maybe clean myself up, go to a treatment center, all these things. My perspective at that time was still not that I had a problem, right? As addicts, we say that, like, we're usually the last ones to know that, like, we really have a problem. So at 27, I tried to get clean. I got clean. I did a few things. But I hadn't surrendered to the fact that I was an addict with a problem who could not use successfully, and that didn't last very long. We talk about rock bottoms around here. I always say that like my bottom can get deeper the more I dig. I'm a firm believer that like rock bottom for me would just be death, because that would be the only time that I could stop digging that bottom myself. So from 27 to 32, I struggled, right? I was in and out of recovery. I would try to get clean and do what I wanted to do. But I never really fully surrendered to, this process that we talk about around here that like, will keep us from detouring off that path.
Mike, I'm very curious. The term surrender. If you were talking with, let's say, a younger person who hasn't indulged in drugs yet, how would you describe that term surrender? You got to surrender your life to what? To lead a good life before you ever get started in this kind of thing, or can you only surrender as a part of the drug recovery?
So I mean, when I use the word surrender, right, it's relevant in my life at the point I'm at now to the recovery from drug use, right? Mm-hmm. But like looking back, like I could have translated that term surrender to like surrendering just to life, right? Because for the longest time I struggled with acceptance. If I didn't like the way something was, I would get totally blow it out of proportion, and then act irate in the situation. Like I said, the evidence was there that drug use was never the answer. At some point, I was, blinded from that evidence and made the decisions I made. But if I would have been able to, at a young age, surrender to the fact and just, accept the fact that, like, I am who I am, things happen the way they do for a reason, and not take everything so personal, maybe, just maybe, things wouldn't have turned out the way they did. But
okay, now I want to build on that a little bit, Mike. That let's just suppose that there were a very meaningful, I'll use the term mentor, who said, Mike, I truly want to get involved in your life. I want to invest in you. I care about you, Mike. I see some things that, Mike, I want you to know you're a good person. But I just see some things that, okay, I see you isolating. I see you just doing some things that, and I've heard you say just some things that, make me want to just take you aside a little bit, certainly not talk down to you, but I just want to talk with you. Mike, I see some things, and can we just have a heart-to-heart talk? If someone had intervened earlier in your life, would that have been effective? Or I want to just say that some say that, hey, I was predisposed. I had to experience what I had to experience. And so really, Mike, what I'm asking you, if there's another Mike in the world, could we intervene and maybe help them avoid what you went through? Or do you look back on it and say, it's not a great choice, but it's been a good experience?
So my thoughts on that is that like that may work for some people. If there was a solid answer to that, a solid speech that we could give somebody, we wouldn't be fighting the epidemic that we're fighting today. Because I had all those things, right? I had men who stepped up in my life and tried to guide me. I had those talks with, the two closest people in my life, my mother and my sister who raised me. But at the end of the day, it got to a point where, like, it didn't matter what anybody said to me. It didn't matter what kind of evidence anybody laid out in front of me. None of that mattered to me. So today, right, for me, I firmly believe that I had to go through what I've went through to get to where I am today. Do I think or do I know? No. I hope that's not the case for everybody, in the world, or, I hope there is people out there who can take the stories of other people who have gone through certain things and, like, really, play that tape through. If I decide to make this decision, there's so many testimonies out there, like, that people ended up going down this road because of it. I might go down that road too, and then they may make that decision to continue to, stay abstinent, or, not make the decisions that could eventually ruin their lives.
So, in hindsight, would it be fair to say that you're just looking for somebody to say, I'm always with you, no matter what choice you make, I'll always be with you, but maybe you just have to experience whatever it is, the road you're going to take to recover, but I'll be with you on the other side, kind of thing? Is that maybe what has to happen to some people, Mike?
So for me, honestly, how it had to happen was all those people who were on my side for the ride, right, for the duration, those people who I dragged through the mud, for me to really hit that breaking point, they had to start to love me from a distance. They had to start to be like, hey, look, you're not hearing what we're saying. You're not seeing the evidence. Like, we kind of have to back off a little bit, right? And what happened with that was, like, I had to sit by myself. I had to be by myself. And look, I'm not like a religious holy roller. I practice some spiritual principles in my life today, but what I can say is that, like, at the end of the road, when I was all by myself, the only conversation that I had was, like, with what I call a higher power. And what I've come to understand today is that, like, he had the picture painted the whole time. Yep. The book was already written, right? It was when I tried to put the paintbrush in my hand, when I tried to pick up the pen, that's when things started to fall apart. I know today that there was a lot of people who were in my life and, tried to guide me and push me along the whole time. But firmly believe that, like, those other people, that higher power I talk about, all that was really already within inside me. But when I did the things I did and I lost, that connection with self, all of that guidance, all of that stuff was, completely out the window. Absolutely, it was right there waiting for me and willing to pick me back up. But I just had to have that moment of clarity, that, that desperation to want to change.
Mike, Marty and I are faith-based. There is a part of that Bible that says, I'll never leave you nor forsake you. I'm always going to be there at the end of the road, so to speak, whatever choice you make. Now, in the minute or so we have remaining, I'm very curious about what you said about love you from a distance. Can you talk to us what that means? And I'm going to say that was you, very specifically you, your personality, your disposition. Describe to us what that means, so we can help adapt to that for other people.
Yeah, so I mean, what that looks like for me is my mom, my sister, the ones who, at the end of the day, enabled me at times to continue to do what I was doing. Like, they had to cut me off. They had to no longer welcome me into their residences. They had to no longer help me financially. They literally had to, take it to a point of, like, look, we've tried and we've tried and we've tried. Like, we can't help you figure this out, so now you need to figure it out on your own. And like I said early at the beginning, right, that feeling of being alone, I remember just being in a dark point in my life where, like, not only did I feel alone, but I was alone. Nobody else really, necessarily, I shouldn't say wanted nothing to do with me, but for the sake of their own self and their own sanity, really just couldn't have anything to do with me.
what I'm interpreting you're saying, Mike, is this is a very, very important concept. It seems as if very meaningful people in your life demonstrated what I'm going to call tough love. I love you, Mike, but you can't come in this house as you are. You're always welcome in this house, but you got to be, I'll use the term, clean. When you are, we're going to welcome you back here with open arms. Is that kind of what you experienced?
Yeah, absolutely, because, the person that was welcome into those houses was not the person that was standing in front of them while I was out doing the things that I was doing. They knew that there was, the real Mike somewhere deep down inside. They knew that the things that I was doing that, stole their sleep at night, stole their peace of mind. They know that wasn't their, the Mike that they had, known and loved for years, right? And yeah, it got to a point where they were like, when you start making the steps to be, to try to become that person that you were meant to be, that you can be, then we can reestablish this thing. But for now, like I said, for our own peace of mind, we kind of got to, take a step back. And
that's a very powerful statement, Mike. That you knew you were loved, you would be accepted, but you knew the terms in which you could be most accepted. I guess I'll use that term. And you made the decision that I will clean up my life. And now that you're on the recovering side, do you have the conviction that never again will you revert to what you were?
So we never say never around here. For me, it's a just for today, a daily thing. Okay. What I do know is that, do I ever want to revert back to those old behaviors? Absolutely not. But what I've learned is that I'll never say never. And when I do that, right, I just continue to set myself up to continue to do the work that's required of me on a daily basis. For me, it's hard to wrap my mind around the concept of never. Never being able to do certain things, never being able to hang out with certain people. I got to take that day by day today. Never is, a very, very strong word. And when I look at that as a whole picture, it can become overwhelming. It can become, almost frightening to a certain point. Mm-hmm. Would I like to say that I would never detour off the path I'm on today? I would love to be able to say that. But when I do that, it kind of skews the program that I live in my life today. Mm-hmm. And when I do that, I would probably be setting myself up for failure, thinking that, like, I got this. Because the truth is, I don't, right? I've been able to stay clean and recover for 14 months now, which is an accomplishment within itself, right? But for me, I never want to lose that desire to stick to the basics. And when I start saying, I got this, I'm never going to use it again, I'm not doing anything but setting myself up for failure.
Well, Mike, I want to tell you how much we appreciate your story, your vulnerability, to just be able to tell people what has been and what could be, but you're on the right path. And we do appreciate your sharing with others, and I feel very certain that a lot of our listeners are going to benefit from what you just said. And I want to thank you personally on behalf of the listeners that you feel very vulnerable and accepting to tell your story the way it is.
Thank you. Not a problem. Anytime.
Contact us at ron@thecooperculture.com or marty@thecooperculture.com if you would like to get more information, or if you would like to discuss a strategic approach to how to help someone who needs encouragement to overcome their current life challenge. We're here to work with you, to help you and those within your circle of influence to overcome life obstacles. Marty and I have produced digital courses on relationships, interviewing skills, and overcoming financial challenges in dating and marriages that you can find by clicking on the store in the introductory page of this podcast series. We hope you will find these resources useful in your life journey. We look forward to establishing a dialogue with you, as our heart's desire is to establish a meaningful relationship with others. Let's all lead from and with the heart to show others we genuinely care.